Hey guys, this is Joe, back with another tutorial with a subscription box from CreateAlong. This one is the Amethyst Moon box. We're going to start today by putting on our gloves, and we're going to add some ink to some translucent clay. The ink we're going to be using is a Adirondack ink called Purple Twilight. And I want to have a gradient here. So 1 drop, 2 drops, 3 drops, 4, and we're going to smooth that out on the clay and then let it dry. Once it dries, which is very, very quick, we will mix that up into the clay. Now, it doesn't have to mix completely. You can actually let it marble a little bit, as you can see here, and that actually will look very pretty in this technique. So we'll do that to all the other shades, and then we will chop them up. What we're doing here is creating a bit of a quartz look. Not exactly the correct technique, but kind of what we're doing. I'm chopping my pieces up very small here. You can leave them larger if you would like. You'll see why I'm chopping mine up quite small in a minute here. After you get them all chopped up, you want to mix those pieces up to get them distributed evenly. Then you want to compress them into a log. You do not want to roll this. If you roll it, you will smear all the different colors and it will just ruin the look. So you want to compress it so that you still get each one of those different globs, for lack of a better word, of clay in your block. And then I'm going to compress it again with my acrylic block here to form a cube of clay. And then I'm going to slice it into equal slices and create a little mini slab. And you can see it's very subtle, but it is, you can see what I'm going for here. Now once it's all together, I will roll it out. And once I've got all the sections connected together, I will put it through the clay machine and take it down to on my atlas, I'm going to take it down to a 6, which is like a medium thin setting. And what we're going to do now is take the absolutely gorgeous silk screen that's called the Moon Crystals and silk screen that on. So we're going to adhere it with the roller, and the paint we're going to use is from Artsy, and it's a metallic silver. Again, using the squeegee from CreateAlong, and put that paint on there, get a good coverage, back and forth to get into all the openings of the silk screen, take off the excess, and then carefully, slowly pull the silk screen up. You can't see it in the light here, but you can see it, you'll be able to see it better here in a little bit. Go wash your silk screen quickly before the paint dries so it's ready for your next usage. Set that aside to dry. And now we're going to use a piece of silver, metallic silver clay that's been burnished down on my piece of copy paper here very, very well. And this clay is actually rolled out to a setting 6 as well. And we're going to use some Armor All on the clay, and we're going to press down one of the deco discs that was also included in the box. And these are called, well, this one looks like a sunburst. That's what I think it looks like anyway. And typically what I do is I use my fingers to pick up the clay and press it in, but because I burnished the clay on the paper, not really going to work this time. So I'm using my fingers and pushing down, and actually using an acrylic roller right in the center to push that down, so I get a good impression into the clay. And there we go. So blot the excess Armor All off the clay, and now we're going to do a mica shift. Now, I had never done a mica shift with one of the deco discs before, and I was very, very, very happy that it worked really well, which is really nice because it's a very small area. So if you're wanting just a really small accent of mica shift, this would be a really good, these deco discs are a really good option. So if you want to do a mica shift, your keys are a really sharp blade, to keep your blade very, very clean, and to have a very good impression. And if you go too deep, don't panic. Just back out your blade, press the clay back down, and start all over. That would be my best advice for doing a mica shift. So you see I keep shaving, and then I keep using my fingers to rub over the impression to see where I might have raised bits that I need to shave off a little bit more. And after I have it all shaved off, I'm going to burnish the impression down. You don't want to roll it here, because if you do, you'll just distort your image. So what you want to do is put some copy paper down and just burnish the image down into the clay. And then you can take something, I use my acrylic roller, and just push it further. Now at this point, I do use the roller because I've got it almost all burnished down, but I do still have, I see some divots in it. So I'm going to use the roller very lightly, and I'm going to roll it in all directions, and you'll see I'll keep turning the paper over and over and over to make sure I'm rolling it in all directions so I don't distort my little sunburst image here. So continuing to roll, roll, roll. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create my frame. So I'm using the stencil, and this is called the Dripping Moon stencil, and I'm putting this through, actually my clay is on the thickest setting of the clay machine, and I'm actually putting the clay and the stencil through the clay machine, which is really cool. And I'm using the tribal shell cutters from CreateAlong, and I'm using the two, this comes in a set of 3, and I'm using the 2 larger sizes. And I'm cutting out the making the cutout with the middle one. And now you need to clean up that edge, because you will not have an opportunity to do this later. So you need to clean that edge now, because what we are creating is the frame. And you'll see what I mean here in a second. So taking the time to get all of that cleaned off. And you need to do this from the front and the back, so I don't show that here, but I also turn it over and make sure I clean the back as well. I'm going to take that, I'm going to center this over my image. Making sure, and I'm going to put a little piece of copy paper down here and burnish it on to make sure I get good adhesion between the 2 layers of clay. No air pockets. and I want to cut out the frame. And the best way I've found to do this is to put the smaller cutter down into the depression, and then put the larger cutter around it, and that's the best way I've found to center that. And once you get it centered, take the smaller one out. Do not leave it in there. You'll be very, very sad if you leave it in there. And then I'm using my acrylic block to cut it out. Now, because you have taken the time to burnish that clay down, it's down. So you need to cut the clay away from the cutter, because it's not going to just, you're not going to be able to just pull that cutter out. It just won't work. So cut the clay away from the cutter. Move the blade underneath the clay and get it all out. And then after that, gently pull the cutter away from the clay piece. And once that's done, you just set that aside, and then you will cure that in your oven for an hour at the temperature temperature for the clay you're using. Now we're going to bring back our silkscreen, and you can see I've been playing with it here. But what I'm doing here is I am actually cutting out some of the gem clusters from some of those images from the silkscreen. The way the light is right now, you can't really see, but you'll be able to see better in just a moment. But I will cut out one of the larger clusters, and then one of the larger gems, and then 4 smaller gems. And I'm cutting right outside of the line, the silver line from that was generated by the silkscreen. So I'm cutting this around, and I want all different shapes. I don't want them all to be the same ones, so I'm getting, there's my large cluster, there's a square one, there's one of the tiny ones I got. So I want a variety here. And then after I get all of these cut out, the next thing I want to do is to create I want to mimic gem shards, like little gem chips, I guess you would say, by just cutting up little pieces of the clay. And I want them to have points to them, so just different sizes and shapes, but the only thing they have in common basically is a point. So I'll cut quite a few of these, and then after I get these all cut, I'll put them on a tile and make sure nothing's touching, so it'll be quite the little pile, or there won't be a pile, nothing will be touching, and then I'll cure them as well. So this is everything cured now the oven and cooled down. And as you can see, they're quite pretty once they're cured. You can see you can tell they were made with translucent clay because you can see through them. Aren't they pretty? And so take everything off the paper and look at that mica shift. So it's really evident now that it's been cured. So I want to trim off all of that excess because I left everything that I burnished it down so well on that paper. I did not want to move it. The cutter did leave some scraggly bits, which are very, very easily cleaned up. I will sand this to get a very, very, very smooth edge, but for now I do want to get it cleaned up. This is going to be a pendant, so I need a hanging apparatus. So what I've decided to do is to put 2 metal rings on the back and cover that with a backing. So just a piece of the silver metallic clay and some Bacon Bond on the back, put the silver rings on there and cover it with the clay, and then I texture it with my texture sponge. Very simple. And I put too much Bacon Bond, but not a problem. Alright, now it's got it all cleaned up, everything's trimmed up, and I'm going to put it on a tile, copy paper, piece, copy paper, another tile, put it in the oven for another 30 minutes and at the right temperature. Alrighty, now for the fun part. So I'm not recommending a particular type of resin here. I'm actually new to the resin game, so this is the kind I use, but don't think that that's what I'm recommending. So what I want to do here is to have, I'm using the larger gem cluster first, and I want it to set, I want it inside of the little frame there, but I want it to set proud. So when I put it in there first, it didn't fit. So I'm using scissors to trim off the bottom to make it curve just like the bottom of the frame. First time it didn't fit, so I've trimmed it a little bit more, and there it fits. Now I don't want that big gem to cover up my beautiful mica shift image there. So now what I'm doing is I'm just dipping the bottom of my gem cluster in the resin. I don't want to put the whole thing, just dipping the bottom of the gem. And then I'm using my UV light, my UV flashlight, to cure the bottom, that resin that's on the bottom of my gem. Eventually, once I get all the gems on there and everything set the way I want it, I'll put it in the big light to cure it very, very, very well. But the flashlight will get it set to where everything stays the way I want it, so that I can move more quickly and not have to keep putting it back and forth in the big light. So I'm holding it up so that it sits at an angle and with one hand and curing it with the flashlight with the other. So putting my little tool there to hold it, make sure it doesn't move, and then I'm going to dip the next gem in the resin, and I'm setting that one in place. And dip the next one, setting it, and I keep doing that until I get a cluster that I'm happy with. Some of them set flat, and then some of them are on top, so that it is a three-dimensional image. All right, now every gem cluster that I've ever seen, when you look at it, it has, you have the gem cluster, and then it has the little tiny shards, or the chips, the gem chips at the bottom. So that's what we're going to do now. So I'm putting little drips of resin along that channel there at the bottom. And once I get that in there, and by the way, this tool right here, I bought it to work with clay, and I still use it to work with clay because it cleans up very, very, very well. But it is so useful for resin because it just picks up the tiniest little bit. And I think CreateAlong sells it now. So now I'm just picking up little pinches of those shards and dropping it into the channel where the resin is. And I want it to be in the channel right there in the front, and then eventually I'll excuse me, I'll also put some behind the gems that are standing proud. I'll put some behind those so that you can see those as well. And here is probably my favorite part, is I used the crystals that came with the box. What are they called? I'm not sure what they called them. No, the rhinestones. And I probably put way too many on it, but they are so bright and shiny, and it is so pretty. So now I put it under the light, and this has been completely cured. So now I want to make the gems seem more gem-like, I guess. I want them to be more rounded. So I'm actually putting a layer of resin on top of each one of the gems. And I'm doing this one by one because I don't want it to look like one great big blob. I want it to be each one of them, kind of like when you decorate cookies and you do one part and let that dry, and then you go over to another part and let that dry. So that's what I'm doing here. So I'm doing each one of the gems one by one, and I'm curing them as I go. And it only takes the slightest little bit of resin because I'm talking a very, very, very thin coat here. But that thin coat gives a great deal of shine, and it's amazing how much dimension it does give, even though it is very, very thin. And it also helps to hold those rhinestones in place because these are hot fix rhinestones, but I didn't put it in the oven, obviously, so the resin will hold them in place. One thing I keep forgetting is to move the resin away from my flashlight. Big mistake. Now what I'm also doing here is to use my tiny tool and run the resin along the edges of each one of the gems. Details matter. And I'm putting a final coat on top of each one of these shards. So I'm continuing to cover each one of the shards. And what I also end up doing, which I didn't show here, is I also cover the frame itself because I decided that there wasn't enough contrast between the frame and the center where the mica shift was. So here it is out of the lamp And look at that shine. And it's so beautiful because I think the mica shift shows up so much better now that the frame has been coated with the UV. So to hang this, I'm just using a simple chain. It is very chunky, but it's simple because I think the pendant has enough bling going on its own. And the clasp is a gorgeous, hook clasp. So I'm putting it together now, which I'm going to be out of frame, so my apologies. All right, now I took the rest of the pink clay that was left over and I smushed it back up, and I did make some other components that I will be turning into earrings. I haven't finished them, but I do have a picture of them at the end of the tutorial here. Well, that's all I have for you today, and I hope you really enjoyed it. If you would like to join us in having fun with these products, please subscribe to the CreateAlong monthly subscription box and have fun creating. Bye-bye.